Joining me today is former Ohio Supreme Court Justice Paul Pfeifer. Welcome
Good to be with
to
you.
the inaugural interview show.
Well, it's good to be here. This should be fun.
Oh, good. Justice, you left the court in January of 17. What are you doing these days?
This afternoon I hope to be mowing hay, but this morning I was in front of the ballot board, and in another hour I'll be on a conference call with our officers. So the principal thing that I get real money for is executive director of the Ohio Judicial Conference, which some wags jokingly call the Judges Union.
The Judges Union, okay. Let me ask this. Do you miss being on the court?
I do not.
Why not?
Because I was blessed with 24 years. I didn't want to be a judge of any kind. Had never thought about the Supreme Court. Got recruited and recruited hard to do it. Recruited principally because at that point I had high name awareness, and folks who seek out candidates like that.
Sure.
I call it a cheap date. But the good news for me was I loved every moment of it, and the even better news was the age limitation took me off the court at just the right time.
What was it like to leave the court after 24 years there?
You know, it was not difficult, because it would have been if I didn't have something to do the next day, but I started the next day as the executive director of the Judicial Conference, which was like catching a fast-moving freight train. There's 722 judges that are all of a sudden people that I'm responsible to report to, and so for me, it was no different than leaving the legislature and going across Broad Street to the court. It was a new opportunity, something new in my life, so.
But you clearly loved the job.
I loved the job, but 24 years was enough.
Well, let me ask you on that subject. You know, the provision in the state constitution that some of us call the constitutionally senile provision.
Yes.
What do you think of it? At age 70, for those that don't know,
I don't think it should be in the Constitution because we're all different in terms of our ability to be active. And, I consider myself among the blessed to have good health, don't take a pill of any kind. But that's not everybody is as lucky.
Why law? Why did you want to be a lawyer?
Because you can make a difference in people's lives, and I think the Constitution and the idea of whether it's the Lincoln-Douglas debates, you name it. I think at age 15 or so, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. Watched, of my generation, you watched Perry Mason. He won all of his cases, and
all but one.
So I got interested in both law and politics. I knew I wanted to do both.
Well, let's go back a little bit. You mentioned you had no intention of becoming a judge. I've heard you never wanted to really originally be on the Supreme Court.
I didn't.
What changed your mind?
It was a combination of factors. I had lost 3 statewide races.
One very close.
One very close, the last one for Attorney General. And in the run-up to running for the Supreme Court, Phil Gramm stopped to see me and wanted me
Senator from Texas,
wanted me to run again for the United States Senate, which I had done in 1982. But in 92, the opponent would have been America's hero, John Glenn. And I may be a lot of things, but I'm no fool. So I told Senator Gramm, look elsewhere. And about the same time, then people were approaching me to run for the Supreme Court. And I was also practicing law in addition to being in the state Senate. And the nature of our partnership was changing, where one partner had left the firm, the 2 wonderful individuals I practiced law with, and the other one was getting up in years. And so changes were happening in that. And so it made a natural time to do something else.
Okay.
And so the happy result for me was I liked it once I got there.
I understand that. I remember your 30 days
Yeah.
as acting chief, and everybody compliments you on the way you conducted yourself.
Well,
how did you think about this?
I had great staff, for one thing, and I utilized something that Tom didn't utilize. We were both old school. All this email and computers and stuff was new to us. So by that time, I was aware that lawyers and judges are reachable that way. Tom had just not done that. So my staff really wrote the stuff, and we communicated with all of the judges and with all the lawyers in the state. We had a wonderful ceremony and tribute to him up at Ohio State in the brand new student union.
I can tell you, the judges and the lawyers thought very highly of the way you conducted yourself.
Well, I appreciate that.
Tell me about the death of Tom Moyer.
Oh, that was, I remember exactly where I was, and it's hard to even talk about that today, When Steve Holland, the administrative director, called me and said Tom had passed,
You know him a long time. You said you went to law school together.
On Tuesday of that week, asked me to run conference in the afternoon. Said he wanted to go back up to the hospital and check on some things. I thought he wouldn't be there on Wednesday. He was on the bench on Wednesday, presided. And the last I saw him was after conference. He said, I'm going back up and check with the doctors again at Ohio State. And I said, well, I can drive you up there. And he said, no, I'll be okay. I said, is Mary coming down? No, I'm driving back up to the hospital. So, yeah, I was at the farm on a tractor.
I can tell you miss him today.
Yeah. The other thing about it, it was dramatic for everybody on the court. And
could you tell our viewers why, so they understand the context?
Well, somebody that you highly regard is with you one day and they're gone the next.
And he had been here a long time.
Yeah, he would have had 24 years in at the end of his term.
Let's go to some cases, though. The one you're obviously going to be asked about, DeRolf.
Oh, yeah.
At least 3, maybe 4 DeRolfs.
Yeah.
Where the court ruled public school funding is unconstitutional. Any thoughts on that looking back?
I think we were right from start to finish. I wrote the final one in which we released it. Unfortunately, and this is no surprise, folks in the legislature didn't really read what we wrote. Within a matter of a couple of weeks, the governor turned around and said, well, we need to fix this and we need to pay attention to the court. But the legislature had become so angry and entrenched that he couldn't get that done. I have grandchildren who are good athletes, and I get into new school buildings all the time, and I feel good about that when I see that, because that, while it wasn't a direct response to how you dole out the operational money, it was a positive response.
Let's move to another subject in which you were involved both at the legislature and here. I'm sure you can guess what it is. Let's talk a little bit about the death penalty.
Yes.
In '81, as best I could tell, you helped the state senator help craft the death penalty statute. And then in 2017, you wrote, quote, "It's time to get rid of the death penalty in Ohio," close quote.
Yes.
Please explain.
Well,
your change in views.
I was Dick Finan, who served with me in the Senate. He was
another
Hamilton County person. He was the true believer in the death penalty. I was more the scrivener. I was less emotionally involved in. I was not a banging a gavel saying, Ohio just desperately needs this. But what eventually happened, I'm on the Supreme Court, and so I'm seeing the outcome of the statute that I helped craft. I thought, it really mechanically doesn't work, and I think we're better than that. So on one level, I came at it from an ethical or philosophical view, and the other from a very practical view.
You famously were raised on a dairy farm near Bucyrus.
Yeah, I mean, when I wasn't here, I was at the farm.
They told me about tractor time.
Tractor time, very important, and I'll have some tractor time this afternoon. Okay. Actually, it's the time we all need to be away from the cell phone, to be away from the television, the ball game, and be away from your staff and the phone. The whole thing. And for me, it's a time to get new ideas. It's a time to actually for some clarity of thinking, and it's just it's healthy.
Having been a justice for so long, seen it from 30,000 feet up, down, plus now your role is on the Judicial Conference. Is it harder, more difficult to be a judge today than 30 years ago?
I think it is in this respect. When I was growing up, when I was a kid, because I grew up in a small county, 50,000 people, shrinking now toward 40,000, yeah. But the judge was a revered personality in the community.
Well respected.
Very well respected. And I can't say that isn't true now, but it's just not the same. Here's the troubling thing. Some organization did a poll, I don't know if it was even in Ohio, and the report that I received was shocking to me, was that 100% of the African American respondents had no good comment, not one good comment about police, about prosecutors, and not about judges. 100% of them. So there's something going on in America today that those of us who've lived our lives in basically white communities
and within the legal system
are failing to understand. I couple that with, I believe it was Carla Moore just left, is it the 9th District, retired. Yeah. And I've known her. I saw an excellent interview in which she said that she felt some of our judges are racially biased. So again, that's startling to me because I haven't picked that up. I would say, no, that's not possible. When you ask me, are things tougher for judges today? I think they may not even perceive it yet, but the ground's shifting under all of us. And it's something that we've got to pay attention to.
Speaking of shifting grounds, you were on the court, I think, when Justice Resnick was elected.
Yes.
First woman in 60 years or something.
Oh, she was here before me.
Oh, she was here before you, okay. But eventually you were on the court with a majority of women.
Yes.
Does that really matter?
It doesn't, except that one day before the afternoon conference, Yvette McGee Brown was leading a discussion of Spanx.
Okay.
So it changed in that regard.
Okay.
Terry O'Donnell and I looked at each other and said, so this is the way it's going to be now. And then there is that little card. I don't know if it's still up there.
No, it's gone. I heard about it.
What did it say?
Women rule.
Women rule, yeah. That card mysteriously appeared above the law books in the conference room the day it went to 4 women and 3 men.
Seems like the court has moved towards more criminal cases and fewer civil. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, it's disappointing. I said, I feel like I'm on the Texas Supreme Court of Criminal Appeals because they have two courts. So from my standpoint, I loved the civil cases, so it made the work a little less enjoyable because in the criminal area, everything, you got all, it's, the defendant is entitled to full due process. And so there are a lot of picking lint out of your navel kind of issues that can come up that the court's saying, well, you know, this wasn't quite right, so we've got to overturn it, and you got to go back and do it over.
I don't write many dissents, except I seem to dissent on taking cases in. So which means
Yes.
I wanted to take the case
Yes.
in, and
Yes.
most majority did not. Tell me how you looked at that process. Motions for jurisdiction.
Yes, yes. Well, it's a big part of your work. It's every 2 weeks. It's about 75 cases. It got less burdensome. You sort of learn after a little while. You don't need to read any further to know that's not going to get your vote. Now, what burned me early on is I knew that pretty quickly into it, but it was salacious. So I kept reading on because I wanted to see
what happened.
What happened and how did this happen? Sometimes I think I know that if this case comes in, I'm not going to like the outcome because I think I know the court. So while I might think this rises to the level of something that ought to come in, I'm not giving it a vote because I don't think I'm going to be happy when the final opinion comes out.
Well, I can tell you, looking at the statistics, over the last 5 years, the number of cases accepted has dwindled.
Yes.
Is that good?
It's not good, but the problem is sometimes it's almost all criminal in that box, and the few civil cases that are in that pile of 75 really aren't worthy of coming in.
You wrote a lot of dissents.
Yeah.
Why was that important to you? I mean, versus just saying I dissent.
Well,
why write the
the
opinion?
makeup of the court changed. A very skilled trial lawyer said to me, Paul, don't just be writing dissents where you just do one-liners and do toss-offs. Your job now is going to be to write thoughtful dissents which we can use in other cases that are not factually a carbon copy of the case the court just decided.
Any thoughts on judicial free speech?
Oh yeah, that's been of interest to me from the beginning. I really think the rules are too confining, but
You're talking about rules for judges.
Rules for judges
speaking and
speaking,
running for office.
And speaking out on issues of the day. But the longer I served on the court, I became institutionalized, so I saw the other side of it. And the rules were the rules. Of course, when I was running, I was still in the legislature at the time, so I had free reign. In my first race, I wasn't a judge and I wasn't confined by those rules. I did abide by those, and for me, part of the constraint, for example, people want to know, what do you think about the abortion question? Well, once you're a judge, you shouldn't be talking about that.
Right, because it could come in front of you.
Yes.
Judicial fundraising.
Judicial fundraising. I once famously said to the New York Times that I've never felt more like a hooker down at the bus station than when I ran for judicial office, compared to running for Attorney General or Governor or United States Senator or State Senator, all of which I had done. In all of those circumstances, I always had the feeling that people were contributing to me because I thought I'd be good in that office. And when you're running for judicial office, there's a little bit of a feeling that they're betting that they think they know how you might decide cases that they might be interested in. Strangely enough, in my personal view, there was a cleaner feel to raising money for partisan political races than there was to raising money for judicial races.
I have a theory. Tell me if I'm right. I have a theory, though, that 99% of the cases, the partisan issue doesn't even, couldn't affect anything in the case.
Yeah, and for the trial judges, that would be particularly true. And for the Supreme Court, it is really only some election law cases. And it's a limited number of those, because a lot of those cases are about local ordinances and all those kinds of things. So there's only one big enchilada in terms of partisan politics on the Ohio Supreme Court in terms of cases, and that only comes around once every 10 years, and that's the legislative districts and reapportionment. Yeah, now that's political. Yeah, and when you vote the wrong way on that, you hear about it.
From having been on the court so long, the newest trends, the biggest changes since you went on the Supreme Court bench?
Well,
for the court system.
I said, you know, when you're on the Supreme Court, you see the judicial system from 30,000 feet. And when you're doing this job, you're seeing it from all levels. And since I was never a trial judge, it's been educational for me.
Looking back, if you had to give your younger self a piece of advice, what would that be?
I think I've done this reasonably well. This would be advice to others.
No, well, to you or to others, sure.
Enjoy the moment.
Okay.
Enjoy where you are today. If you're a judge at any level, and I'm heartened by the fact that I don't run into many judges who are unhappy that they decided to make that career decision and to leave the practice.
In terms of serving on the Ohio Supreme Court, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to remember you?
That he was fair.
Last but not least, is there anything I haven't asked you about, now that we've talked quite at length, that I haven't touched on, that you think's important?
There are a lot of other people like us who have been blessed to hold high public office. It's a blessing, and seize opportunities when they present themselves. The opportunity when you hold public office to perhaps influence young people that you don't even know, but can be the next star in terms of public service.
That's why I speak every year at Boys State.
Yes, there you go. That's
same concept as
that's the
4-H.
Yeah. Those of us who have had the opportunity to do these things, that's a payback that we should all do every time somebody serves it up.
Well, I want to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
But also, I'm honored for you to be the first guest.
Well, I'm honored to do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.